Hi, boys and girls. So today we are doing a quick video that goes along with 13-5, compare fractions using benchmark numbers. So to get us started for this, we are going to watch a very quick video from Envisions. So let's get started.
How can benchmark numbers be used to compare fractions? Think about this question during the lesson. Carrie wants to buy 2/6 of a container of roasted peanuts. Alan wants to buy 2/3 of a container from a same-sized container of roasted peanuts. Who will buy more peanuts? What are you asked to determine? What is important to know before you compare fractions? You are asked to determine the person who will buy more peanuts. Before you compare fractions, it is important to know that the wholes are the same size. You can compare fractions to commonly used benchmark numbers, such as 0, 1/2, and 1.
Select a fraction to place it on the number line. What conclusions can you make?
So boys and girls, I'm going to take 2/6, 1/2, and 2/3 and place them on this number line. If you notice, the number line is labeled with a 0 and a 1, which tells us we are only focusing on fractions for this lesson in between 0 and 1. So when I'm looking at these, I'm going to do the one that I know is easiest, and that is a half. I know the halfway mark is going to be right in the middle. And for some reason, it's not letting me click on it, but a half would go right here. Oh, there we go. I just had to double click it. So a half is going to go right in the middle. So then I look at 2/6, and I'm going to envision this number line broken up into 6 equal parts. And I know 2/6 would go someplace around here. So there it is, 2/6. And then I'm thinking of 2/3. If this was broken up into thirds, 2 out of 3 would be closer to this side.
Compare each fraction to the benchmark number 1/2. Then see how they relate to each other in size.
So boys and girls, look at what it says up here. 2/6 is less than 1/2, just like I showed you on the number line. 2/3 is greater than 1/2, like I showed you on the number line.
2/6 is less than 1/2. 2/3 is greater than 1/2. Without looking at the containers, how can you tell that 2/6 is less than 2/3? You can tell that 2/6 is less than 2/3 because the numerators are the same, and you can compare the denominators. The fraction with the greater denominator is less than the other fraction. What is the missing symbol?
Select your answer.
So boys and girls, if I am looking at this example here, 2/6 is blank to 2/3, I can look at my model, and like they said in the video, I can look at the denominators. Since the numerators are the same, I can obviously see that 2/6 is less than 2/3.
2/6 is less than 2/3.
Remember, 2/6 and 1/3 are equivalent fractions.
Alan will buy more peanuts than Carrie. Now you know how benchmark numbers can be used to compare fractions.
Okay, boys and girls, so we are now going to go back to our Smart Notebook lesson. So I have here another example because benchmark fractions can be a little bit tricky, but they are so helpful. So here is an example that I pulled right from your math book. Mr. Evans wrote 2/8, 4/8, 6/8, 1/8, 3/8, 5/8, and 7/8 on the board. Then he circled the fractions that are closer to 0 than to 1. Which fractions did he circle? Which fractions did he not circle? So boys and girls, here is a little bar model. The 0, the half, and the 1, those are our benchmark fractions. That is going to help us know which fractions are closer to 0, which are closer to 1. So the first thing we're going to do is take all these fractions and we're going to lay them out on our line. So of course, if this was broken up into eighths, I know that I would have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. And let's stop for a second and talk. And I'm sorry, they are not completely evenly distributed. It's kind of hard when you're using the little tool here. The 4/8 is in line with 1/2. If you remember, 4/8 and 1/2 are equivalent fractions. A really easy way to remember that too is 4 is half of 8. So that helps you remember that. So I'm going to keep going. I then have 5/8. I have 6/8. I have 7/8, and of course I have 8/8. And if you notice, 8/8 is lined up with a whole because those are equivalent. So, which fractions, boys and girls, are closer to 0? What should we circle? So if I'm looking at this, I would obviously see 1/8 is closer to 0, 2/8 is closer to 0, 3/8 is closer to 0. I'm not going to circle 4/8 because 4/8 is right in the middle. 4/8 is with a half, and that's not asking that up here in the question. It wants to know which ones are closer to 0 than to 1, and obviously it should be those three. So let's continue with another example. So on this one, this is the one that you have either in the packet that is in front of you or you are watching it from the packet on your screen. I'm really helping you out here with questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to give you some time to make sure that you have that out in front of you so you can work through this with me. Go ahead. Okay, so now that you hopefully have your packet, let's get started. In 1 and 2, choose from the fractions 1/3, 5/6, 3/4, 3/8. And boys and girls, I have provided for you a model to help you. I have put all of those fractions on number lines and I color coded them for you. So let's start with the first one. Which of the fractions are closer to 1 than to 0? So if this was not here, you would be looking at these. These are the fractions it said to focus on. So without even looking at my model to the right, you should easily be able to see that 5/6 is closer to 1 and 3/4. Because 5/6 is 1 away from a whole, 3/4 is 1 away from a whole, and you can even see that over here. Here's 5/6, here is 3/4. So now we're going to go on to our next question, which is question number 2. Which of the fractions are closer to 0 than to 1? So same type of concept now. Let's look at these fractions. We're looking at these again. So we said for number 1, 5/6 and 3/4 was closer to 1. But now we're looking at which ones are closer to 0. 1/3, oh my goodness, that is very close to 0. And then 3/8 is close to 0. Okay, so you would put that right here for number 2. So for number 3, you are not going to be using the fractions up top that were listed for you. It says write two fractions with a denominator of 8 that are closer to 0 than to 1. We know denominator is the bottom number. So right now, boys and girls, you are thinking of two fractions that have an 8 as a denominator that are closer to 0 than to 1. If you need that support, you would focus your attention up top here on the one that has the 8s. I'm going to give you some time to think of two fractions that are closer to 0 than to 1. Okay, so by looking at this fraction, here is the 0. Obviously, 1/8 could have been a fraction that you wrote down. That is very close to 0. And 2/8. We could have said 3/8 as well, but we already used that one up here in number 2. All right, last one says, I'm going to change my color here. Let's do nice, beautiful purple. Use the benchmark half and the fractions 1/8 and 5/8 to write three comparison statements. Okay, half. Well, I can easily see 1/2 is right here. That means it would also be here. It would also be here. It would also be here. And it would also be here. All of these places on the number line represent 1/2. And remember the clue I gave you on the previous page. If the numerator is half of the denominator, it equals a half. 4/8 is 1/2. 3/6 is 1/2. 2/4 is 1/2. So you're going to use those fractions to write three comparison statements using 1/8, 5/8, and a half. For example, I might say 1/8 is less than 5/8. Okay? I know that because here would be the halfway mark. Here's 1/8, there's 5/8. And there's many other ways that you can do this. This is just one example to get you started. Okay, we are now moving on to the final page. And once again, boys and girls, in your packet, you are not given the fraction strips or the fraction number lines. I just thought this would support you. I totally understand that some of you might not need that, but it's there if you do. So we are only going to do number 5, and then I want to see how you do on the rest. So number 5 says 2/6 is blank to 2/4. So you guys are going to use your idea of these benchmark fractions. You're going to use your understanding of the 0, of the half, and of the whole to help you answer these. So you don't even have to look over here to answer this first one. We know that 2/6 is very close to 0. Think about it. 0, 1/6, 2/6. And if you need that reminder, look, let me change colors for you. It would be right here. 2/4. I know 2 is half of 4. That is very close to, or that is, excuse me, 1/2. So look at that. I can tell that 2/6 is smaller than a half. Definitely. So you're going to use that idea and that thinking of using 0, of using 1/2, and of using a whole to help you answer the rest of these questions. Well, boys and girls, I hope that this lesson was helpful to get you started with 13-5. Bye.